guys, welcome to the first ever video of my booktube channel. My name is Marie, and if you haven't gathered in the past 10 seconds, I am absolutely in love with reading. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to tell you my 15 favorite books of 2024. I've read a lot of books. My goal was 50, and we can safely say that I have more than met that goal. But out of the 50, I did have quite a bit of disappointing reads, and I did have loads of good ones. So we're going to be here yapping about the amazing books that I've read. The first book I'm going to talk about is a very recent book which was released earlier this month by Lauren Asher. She calls it a novella, but in my heart it just feels like a book. My December Darling is a Christmas rom-com novella that I gave 9.5 stars because the only thing that was missing was that it wasn't 600 pages like any of her other books, which is the main thing that I wanted after the book was over. My December Darling follows Luke and Catalina. Luke's best friend is the groom and Catalina's sister is the bride, and they both have to get along because they don't want his friend or her sister's wedding to kind of be ruined by both of their moods. It's not like they're enemies, they just don't have such a high opinion of each other. So when her sister and his friend make them spend a little bit more time together, they become friends and they slowly start to like each other as people at first. Why I love this book so much, and even though it's 9.5 and not a 10, why it's my favorite book of the year is the fact that it was a traditional rom-com which extremely 2000s Christmassy vibes. It was like when Luke realized that he liked Catalina, he asked her out on a date, and then he walked her home and then kissed her on her front porch, which was absolutely so adorable and so cute, and it took them 4 dates to even do the deed. It was so traditional, the timeline was so perfect, and this is not to say that I hate books that aren't traditional, but it was completely refreshing, especially in Lauren Asher's writing style, to see something blossom from two people going from practically strangers to friends to people who like each other to eventually lovers. And there was only one smut scene, which was kind of like the highlight. I love it when authors minimize the smut scenes to add substance to the character, which I'm not sure is why Lauren Asher did it. It's probably because the book is just short, but it still holds a special place in my heart nonetheless. Next, I'm going to be talking about two of my favorite Hannah Grace books. She has 3 books, and after having not a high opinion of Icebreaker, I decided to give Wildfire a go. I borrowed it from my friend, and it was very surprising. I kind of expected it to take the same plot line as Icebreaker, even though I did read the synopsis. And even though the characters do sleep together when they first met, they both work at a teenager summer camp where they're not allowed to fraternize with each other. This book, I think it just kind of healed my inner child because it just gave bunked vibes. And Aurora, who's the FMC, her description is insanely similar to Emma Ross from Jessie and Bunked. So in my mind, I just pictured the entire campsite as Camp Kikiwaka. It was so wholesome personally, but the storylines delivered. It was on point. There was not that much dragging. You shipped Aurora and Russ when they were together in their romantic feels, and you also shipped them as amazing friends. The kids and the teenagers who made the camp a chaotic place were even better. They added such a nice touch. It made the camp feel more authentic. Sometimes authors choose a destination or a setting just because they want that setting to be there, not because the setting actually plays a crucial part in the story. But she integrated the camp into literally every single thought or every single thing that was happening because they were all literally living at the camp for 3 weeks, and the camp actually played a role that it was supposed to play. Enough gushing about the camp. I like the side characters, and I kind of wanted Xander, one of the side characters, to have his own book, but then I realized that it's the Maple Hills series, and probably another Maple Hills hockey player is going to have the next book. Which brings me to the second, or Hannah Grace's 3rd book, which is Daydream. This one received 11 out of 10 for me because of the way I felt seen by this book. I feel like Hannah Grace just took her hands, reached into my mind, and then took out the 2 distinct parts of my personality from how I deal with my social life and academic life and put them into Hallie Jacobs and Henry Turner. I related to these characters so much. Every single thought or feeling that I had felt where I felt like people didn't understand me, I saw in these characters, and I have never felt more seen by any piece of media or literature or even person ever. I feel like if you could inject any book into your veins, I would inject this book into my veins. This would be a part of me forever. Unfortunately, I read it on Kindle, but I really want the physical copy, so I'm going to get it and I'm going to annotate it, and probably I'll do a tour of my annotations. This book was very emotional. I love emotional books. If you're a reader, you're a masochist. It's just how it is. It was very emotional in a good sense, and it was also cliche in the perfect way. Not cliche in the way where you're like, oh, this is gonna happen, isn't it? And it happens. In a way where like, oh my god, I really want this to happen. I really hope she says this. I really hope he does that. And then whatever you're thinking of, whatever you're hoping for, happens. It's like she just knows what you're thinking and she's just gonna deliver it onto the page. 11 out of 10. Next, I'm going to be talking about two books that have no similarity in them whatsoever other than the fact that they're rom-coms, which are The Unhoneymooners and The American Roommate Experiment. First, I will talk about The Unhoneymooners by Christina Lauren, which I'm pretty sure everyone has already heard of since this book was released in 2019. But in case you haven't, Ethan and Olive are the brother and sister of the bride and the groom, not in the same family, just to preface. And somehow the entire wedding party gets food poisoning except these two. And could root for the characters, and there was so much angst, and nothing about it felt cringe. Even the third act breakup made sense. Like, it wasn't much of miscommunication, even though a little bit of miscommunication was there, but the third act breakup made sense, and so did the reconciliation. Next, I'm talking about Elena Armis's second book, which is The American Roommate Experiment. I liked it when I read it the first time last year, but I loved it a lot more when I read it the second time. Which reminds me, I hated The Unhoneymooners when I read it for the first time. I don't know why. I think it's because the hype around it was so much, and I had already been so late to reading it last year that it just kind of felt underwhelming. So when I read it again with that expectation that, oh, it's gonna be so bad because I remember it being horrible and underwhelming, it actually surprised me. Reverse psychology at its finest. Now, back to this. I didn't like Spanish love deception. It felt very Wattpad-centric, and the editing was not editing. I didn't like the Spanish love deception that much. It felt very Wattpad-centric, and I kind of had very low hopes going into this one, which is the case for a lot of the books. I end up hating the first one by the author, end up loving the second and third one that they have put out. So, Elena Armis's second book, The American Roommate Experiment, follows Rosie and Lucas, who have to stay in Catalina's apartment due to various issues, and they become very good friends. Rosie has had a one-sided crush on Lucas for a really, really long time, but she doesn't tell him quite until the end. But since they have to be together in forced proximity, Lucas, the gentleman that he is, so adorable with the way they become like good friends, and they're scared about messing up their friendship with the relationship. All things that happen in a regular rom-com. I feel like it's a fun rom-com, friends to lovers. You would have such a good time reading it if you were not in a good mood. I would just say pick this up and you would have a fun time. Next, I'm talking about two Anna Huang books, which are the third and fourth book in the King of Sin series, which are King of Greed and King of Sloth. King of Greed follows Alessandra and Dominic, who have been married for 10 years, but Ale asks for a divorce because Dominic has been neglectful in their relationship and is kind of like married to his work. I went into this book with a lot of skepticism because I wasn't sure if I was gonna like the way that that neglect is being romanticized, but it wasn't romanticized at all. You had a lot of insight into Dominic and Alessandra's heads, and you could actually appreciate the way that Anna Huang kind of wove all of these insecurities that they both had about their lives into the relationship, and why it wasn't only one person's fault that the relationship went haywire, but it was both of their faults for not seeing each other properly. Then we have King of Sloth, which pleasantly surprised me again because I'm not really a huge fan of Anna Huang's writing. I'm just there for the vibes. So I didn't really expect much. I don't usually expect much when I go into her books. I'm just there for the vibes, right? So King of Sloth is a reverse Grumpy Sunshine, and instead of Sloane, who is the FMC, being portrayed as a bitch, she's being portrayed as a strong Doberman. So instead of having like a black cat golden retriever, we have a Doberman, who is Sloane, and golden retriever, who is Xavier or Javier. It was very, very, very slow burn. I loved it so much, and it hasn't been, like, it's been so long since I've read a proper slow burn that reading it kind of surprised me. I was like, wait a second, why haven't they made out yet? Or why haven't they flinged yet. And then I realized it's just I've been so desensitized to the fact that slow burn needs to exist that when I saw it, I was so surprised and I was so happy too. So though both of those books received a 9-star rating from me. Drumroll please, an oldie but a goodie, but A Midsummer Night's Dream by William Shakespeare. I saw this edition in the store and it was like so pretty and so unique that I just had to get it. And I don't really buy classics a lot, but the edition was pretty and I kind of wanted the feeling of nostalgia because in 8th grade I did this play for an English project, so I kind of wanted to just read it for the nostalgia. And if you guys can see, I have annotated it quite a bit, not a lot. It's only 80 pages, but it took me 4 days to read because I'm not fluent in Shakespearean English. But if you do want to spend the time into reading this, let me tell you, you will gain so many insults for your vocabulary. We know that no one is better at insults than British people. And we know that no one ever is better than Shakespeare. Shakespearean insults have their own flair for a reason. The next book that I read was My Mechanical Romance by Alexine Farrow-Fulmouth. I did not know she was Olivia Blake until I finished the book and I went to add it to my Goodreads and it said by Olivia Blake. I was like, oh, that's pretty cool because I've heard a lot of good things about Olivia Blake. Regardless, I still love this book so much because it was a high school book and the characters behaved like high schoolers. One thing I hate is when authors over-sexualize or even sexualize minors who are in high school books by portraying them doing things very under 18 like. The book itself would be flagged with mature content and rated for readers only 18 and above. So why would the characters who are minors be doing things that only legal adults should be allowed to read? Which was not the problem in this book, that high schoolers actually behave like high schoolers, and this book had the most amount of accurate representation, which was amazing. Our main characters, Belle and Teo, are both Hispanic and they're both in their high school robotics team. It's a school for the academically gifted. And I would like any of you guys to tell me about a robotics team in any American high school that is comprised completely of white people. You can't, because it does not exist anywhere. But you know what it does consist most of? Mostly it consists of people of color, especially Indians and Asians. But this book had Indians, Asians, Hispanic, Black people, and a few white people. So, safe to say it had people of many, if not all, of the races involved in the robotics team. Even though it is a little bit stereotypical, it is also very, very realistic. The banter in this book was amazing. It was hilarious. I loved seeing these two characters interact, and it just kind of brought me back to my high school self because I kind of missed the high school setting and everyone just like talking to each other in the hallway. And even though we do have TV shows, nothing actually hits your amygdala like a book. I don't know what books have to do with the amygdala, but like, just trust me on this, okay? You've been with me for this long. I think we can start trusting each other now, so just trust me on this. It did something to my amygdala. The next book that I'm going to be talking about is A Thousand Boy Kisses by Tilly Cole. This one has actually been recommended to me a long time ago, I think sometime in 2020 or 2021, by my favorite booktuber of all time, Steph Bora. Shout out to her. She's the reason I'm even here in the first place. She inspired me to start this channel. So Steph, if you're seeing this by any chance, you the man. You the girl, you the everything. You inspired me to start this, and even if this goes nowhere, I just feel proud of myself knowing that I was able to put myself out there because of you. You're an inspiration. But back to the book. When I saw it in Steph's video, I added it to my TBR, and because I kept adding a million books onto it afterwards, I completely forgot it existed. Until recently, I was clearing out my TBR, and then I saw it, and I was like, why did I just forget that it existed? And I bought it, and I read it, and I cried. I mean, I didn't bawl my eyes out like the bookstagrammers and book talkers said I would, but I did cry, and it was really emotionally impacting. If you don't already know what this book is about, it's about Poppy and Rune, who have been best friends since they were 5 or 6 years old, and when they're like in their mid-teens, Rune has to move back to his home country, Norway, and Poppy stops talking to him, and he comes back and he's like, why would you stop talking to me? And then she tries to hide the fact that she has cancer and that she's dying in a few months, and then he finds out, he goes ballistic, blah blah blah. But then it's written in past and present perspective, so you get to see them growing up as best friends and then falling in love for the first time and then falling back in love together. So it's kind of like a second chance romance, but they never fell out of love, which is really awesome and also really, really painful. And I heard the second one's even more painful, so we're just gonna have to wait and see. The next book that I'm going to be talking about is Butcher and Blackbird by Brynne Weaver. This is Brynne's debut novel, and I kind of expected it with the cover art and kind of the marketing that was going on in Book Talk and Bookstagram and on BookTube too, for it to be some kind of Penelope Douglas or Rena Kent or some very Wattpaddy mafia-esque book, but it wasn't. It was pleasantly surprising. Both of the characters behaved like humans, even though they are serial killers who kill other serial killers. They both behaved so normal that at some point I forgot that their side profession was killing other serial killers. There is a whole page of trigger warnings in this book though, because it can get very graphic and very violent and very, very explicitly descriptive. So I would not recommend this for the faint-hearted, but it felt like a rom-com. Maybe I'm just desensitized because of Wattpad in my early teens, which should not have existed. But, you know, if you like Rena Kent and Penelope Douglas and you've already been desensitized to something like very dark, this would be a refreshing rom-com with a hint of darkness, I would say. And that's all the standalones for today. I am going to be talking about 3 series and 1 duology today, but since I only read the first book in the duology, I'm going to start with that. I read Divine Rivals by Rebecca Ross. If you haven't already heard about this book and if you haven't been persuaded to read this book yet, I'm persuading you to go read this book now. The writing is so pretty. It's so poetic. It's very show don't tell, but you need to have the patience for it. I'm someone who appreciates extensive description in fantasy and romantasy novels because without the description, it just kind of feels bland. It feels very contemporary, which is what I hate in fantasy novels. Like if I'm reading a fantasy novel, I'm in it for the fantasy vibes. I don't want to feel like I'm reading a contemporary novel when I'm reading a fantasy novel. So, with that said, the show don't tell was on point. The descriptions were so pretty. It honestly just felt like I was reading a poem in the form of a book. The story, the romance between Iris and Roman was also really cute. It was very well thought out. Even though the fantasy world building is kept to a minimum in this book, you could still understand the authenticity behind it and it didn't feel like it was just half-assed. It actually felt very planned out, and I'm so excited to read the second one. I have it, but I haven't read it yet. So I'm probably just going to reread this and then read the second one immediately because this book ends in a cliffhanger and it's a good one. The second series I'm going to talk about is A Good Girl's Guide to Murder, which I'm pretty sure everyone, their mother and their grandmother has read, but not me. I read the whole series for the first time this year and I loved all of the books, especially the third one. If there was one book that I could forget, it would be As Good as Dead, which is the third one, because I was literally on the edge of my seat when I was reading every single page past like the 4th or 5th chapter. I did not want to put that book down. It was a one-day read for me. The planning that Holly Jackson would have had to do, the research that she would have had to do to be able to pull that plotline together, that in itself was baffling. The next series that I'm going to be talking about is the Shadow Me series, which is my most favorite series of all time. If I could inject a single book into my veins, it would be Daydream by Hannah Grace. If I could inject a whole series into my veins, it would be Shatter Me, and I will fight you if you try to change my opinion. You can have your own opinion, but if you try to change mine, I will fight you. I've read Shatter Me ever since the first book came out, and I have been rereading all the previous books every year, every time a new one would come out, and I'm so sad that it ended last year. So I reread the whole thing this year, and I'm really excited to get James's spin-off series. I know it's gonna be amazing. Finally, the third series that I'm going to be talking about is The Inheritance Games, which is also not that new. Even the first few books are pretty old. The 4th and the 5th one had just come out this year and the year before. So I did read the first 4 books, and I can't really say anything about the last 3 without giving away the plot of the first one. So let me just tell you, it would be one of the best decisions you've ever made if you're in the mood to get your brain working for a little bit of contemporary billionaire, also dark academia, but also southern. You just had a lot of vibes, and I was there, I was vibing, I was having fun, and the plot twists, there did not have to be that many plot twists. I feel like there was a plot twist in every page, and it wasn't overwhelming. It kept the story going, and I was invested too, and that is how an author should do it. Let me tell you something about The Inheritance Games. I have 8 exams with every round of exams that I have. consecutively without any breaks. So I have to write an exam every day for 8 days except for the weekend. And I started the first Inheritance Games book on my first exam and finished the last one on the day of my last exam. So basically 4 books in 8 days while I had to write an exam, come home, study, go back, write an exam. I was reading in between study sessions because I gave myself an incentive to look forward to. I was like, once I finish this chapter, I can read 1 chapter in the Inheritance Games. And Jennifer Lynn Barnes, somehow, by some magical miracle, if you're seeing this, just know you're the reason I got good grades in that round of exams. Hello guys, it's me in the future editing this video, and I realized I completely forgot to film an outro for it, so this is just gonna be the outro. Thank you guys so much for staying for this long and listening to me yap about books for I think around 20 minutes. The real footage was much longer, to be honest. Anyway, I have linked my Instagram and my Goodreads below. On my Goodreads, I post really long reviews critiquing books and breaking them down into molecular levels if you guys want to read that, and we can be friends and follow along with each of our reading goals. I'm so excited that this video happened, and I'm really excited for the next one too. I will see you guys in the next video. Au revoir!